Hi everybody, TEDx Growth Strategies. We're going to have a fantastic panel on climate. Let's get started.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay? Really fantastic to be here. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Rock Rabbit. We focus on making building decarbonization a lot easier for carpenters, for instance, for plumbers, for HVAC contractors, general contractors, etc. You could think of us like a TurboTax for electrification rebates. In terms of background, my background has been in the energy sector for some time. I've spent maybe 13, 14 years working at different utility companies and government agencies, kind of designing and deploying those incentive programs, and decided to found Rock Rabbit to basically build out the product suite I wish had existed when I was in those roles. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Divya D'Amato. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Good Ops. We work with large companies on building climate strategies in their supply chain. And typically, this is working directly with Scope 3 emissions, looking at the supplier network, and helping them understand the technologies that could help them achieve their climate goals. Is also, we also partner a lot of times with VCs as well, and looking at their portfolio companies and supporting them on understanding how their startups could be best compatible with some of the corporate needs in the global supply chains. And for startups as well, helping them sort of position themselves for some of these opportunities with large corporations that are looking for this technology but may not know exactly how to make those introductions. My background, first off my career, was as an in-house operator. I was in supply chain and logistics for companies like Walmart, Walmart.com actually here in the old days of e-commerce when I just sort of started out, as well as other venture-backed companies in the Bay Area. And for me, it was really, and we're going to get into a little bit of our journey, but just high level, it was great to be an operator and sort of really intimately understand what it takes to bring product to market. But it was always, to me, at what cost. So that sort of prompted me to take my journey, which we'll get into later. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Karan Chopra. I'm the co-founder of E98. We are a platform that helps companies quantify and then optimize with ROI, adaptation and mitigation actions, either in their own operations or in their supply chains. So we fuse together scientific models with financial data, operational data, to then build models and agents that can help you really understand ROI of actions that you can take, real business ROI in your companies. In terms of background, I've been in the climate space for over 15 years. It's my sort of third venture in the space. So the journey started off as in a rice farming business in Ghana, which is where I grew up, and then it's a physical climate responding, and now I do that. Also recently came out with a book, and Preethy has encouraged me to flash it, so I will. Called the Climate Intelligent Organization. So it's basically how we now have AI-powered climate intelligence to make the right decisions for your companies. So there's no excuse.
Wow, good.
Thank you. I'm Ritu Gupta. Really excited to be here, and thank you all for coming. Thanks for Preethy for organizing this. So I am here in my capacity on this panel as the co-founder of the Clean Table. It is a community, a think tank in Livermore, so Tri-Valley area. Our focus is to help climate solution companies that are going for a first-of-a-kind project, and which I'll talk about later. I'm sure many of you know what that is. Help them accelerate adoption and financing. So that's why I'm here. And as background, and I think we're going to talk about our journey later, so I'll go into it later, but I've been in corporate for 25 years, worked large companies, small companies, and a few years ago really got passionate about climate. I worked in healthcare for a long time, and many people ask me a question, that's an impactful industry. Why are you changing your focus? And for me, it is there's no human health if there's no planetary health, and so that's what drives me.
Yeah, actually, we can start with you, but before I get to the next question, how many of you actually work in climate? Okay, that's great. Because all of you chose to work in climate, and right now, there are all these conversations that are going on about the importance of being in climate and also the challenges of being in climate, right? So it actually takes a little bit of more courage for us to embark on this. And I chose that journey a couple of years ago, taking on the climate role, because I really felt I had worked on this industry for 20 plus years, and then what can I do more for creating an impact, right, back in the planet, helping with energy efficiency. That was my journey. Let's hear from each of the panelists, like what brought them to this? Why did you take this journey, and how has it been so far? We can start.
All right. So this is my fourth career pivot. I've worked in multiple industries. I've worked in finance, large healthcare system, digital health, and now in climate and sustainability. And throughout my journey of now 25 years, the through line has been that I've worked on innovative projects that have made an impact. So for example, when I was at Kaiser Permanente, I've worked on a series of partnerships to help seniors age at home. And also the other through line is that I've always worked with external and internal stakeholders to move these projects forward. And in climate, that probably resonates with you because there's so many stakeholders, the ones we are used to, and then some of them we might not be used to or started to think about, like nature and water and biodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, the switch was, as I said, it became, I guess it almost sounds cliche, but it became a calling. It was like, if I want to work for the next 20 years or 10 years of my life, I could retire, but if I want to work, this is where I want to work. And what led to the Clean Table was, it is in partnership with two organizations in Livermore. One is Daybreak Labs, which is an incubator, and Innovation Tri-Valley. So I was talking to my partners, and they were saying, when founders are trying to launch a first-of-a-kind project, and by definition it's risky because there's more funding needed, there's technical risk, there is the valley of death is deeper. So they need, and there are multiple stakeholders needed to make it successful, like from government to policy, to funders, to founders, to technical experts. So we said, how can we start supporting them? So we started the Clean Table, which is intimate conversations, so like 20 to 30 people, really, really focused on having people in leadership positions at those tables to talk about how do we move these projects forward. So we had an event 2 weeks ago, which was at the Mentee Winery. So this was very successful, and we hope to have more.
So on the journey, or maybe what led to Athena. So I was born in India. I grew up in Ghana, and so I started by writing code to optimize the energy grid. But my first real venture was an agriculture business back in Ghana. And the reason for doing that business was because, and I was growing rice. So for all intents and purposes, I was a rice farmer. And the reason for that business was because growing up there are a few things, right? So rice as a crop, for those who maybe know, is quite a hungry crop. It's a water hungry crop. It has a number of emissions dimensions to it. It's not just carbon but methane around it. And in a place like Ghana, 70% of the poor are smallholder farmers. That's what they do. That's their livelihood. And so really that venture was about bringing R&D and technology to then both increase productivity, improve livelihoods, and then also dramatically reduce the footprint there. So built that business for 6 years, but as we were building that business, experienced all of these climate events firsthand. So my entire processing facility was damaged in a 1 in 50-year storm. So I woke up the next morning and I was sitting on this line of credit from Deutsche Bank that I no longer knew how to repay because the asset was on the ground, or we were working with small farmers who you were seeing all these changes in rainfall patterns there, and that was for many of them that's sort of a life or death issue around it. And so when we sold that business, I decided there's got to be a way now to use satellite data, to use AI, to use ML to basically give better predictive intelligence on what I would have wanted as an operator. And that then led me to a journey around physical climate risk modeling. I heard a number of things from our customers there on what they need, and then our Athena, which does things a bit more holistically than just physical climate, but that's the journey.
No, that's great. I think you worked in different continents to get that context and did so many different things. Looking forward to hearing more as we go forward. Divya.
So as I alluded to a little bit before, being an in-house operations operator for large companies as well as startups, I had the opportunity early days to go in country, to go to factories in Shenzhen, visiting dormitories, meeting the workers themselves. And not that it was a sustainability mission per se, but it was an operations mission, which is typically around efficiency, around cost savings, around just improving the bottom line in many ways. And I kind of felt like, wait a minute, this makes sense in many ways, that if you think about what a startup or any business has to do is to think about efficiencies, but again, at what cost, right? So you might be saving money downstream for the end consumer, but what is actually happening to the workers along the way and the natural resources? And so, in 2012, when I was in New York City, I said, okay, there's a better way to do this, and ventured out on my own and started to get clients that were coming to me from different perspectives, usually just on that strategy side of things, but little by little starting to infuse that, hey, this is actually a business, competitive advantage as you start thinking about the relationships you have with your suppliers, looking beyond just that tier one, but going deeper and saying, hey, this is where you can actually get better visibility, you can actually get a better probably sense of reducing kind of the turnover, and then little by little, as this kind of conversation of supply chain and sustainability, COVID really brought this to the surface, but it's also a source of innovation and opportunity, So for me, it just was very clear, and CSR has a place in this world, philanthropy has a place in this world, but I felt that all these companies that were just sort of, trying to do good, I kept saying, well, you do have to do it in everyday business, and that's really what got me to just commit to this.
No, that's great. I think we have startups in this panel, and then you're making an impact on some of the big companies, and how do you make them more sustainable? That's fantastic, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was originally a physicist, actually, and then I pivoted into what was then called clean tech. So that was a little while ago, probably around 2010. And so it wasn't that long after Inconvenient Truth, for instance. And as I was doing my PhD at that time, I just grew increasingly interested in climate change. So ultimately decided to kind of take all of those transferable skills from my PhD and then pivot into energy, and then started out in energy at the Department of Energy in what was then called the Sunshot Initiative. So began my career on the so-called solar coaster, which anyone who's been in climate or clean tech for a while can definitely appreciate the terminology there. But then really spent 13, 14 years really understanding the sector and the domain. And it had all been energy transition focused, but I grew increasingly interested in entrepreneurship. I was in some really fantastic roles where I got to collaborate a lot with founders and launch innovative pilots, and that was very energizing to me. Ultimately, it was the IRA passing that kind of pushed me to eventually start RockRabbit. I'd been mapping out this domain for some time and had been kind of incubating different ideas for some time, and I figured, okay, well, if I'm not going to start RockRabbit now, when would I? Obviously, there's a bit of federal policy chaos right now, so a lot of uncertainty there, but nevertheless, it was a good push that I needed. I knew I was going to regret not trying my hand at entrepreneurship. So it's kind of more personal. For me, I'm very impact focused. My co-founder is, our entire team is, and so what we're focused on is really at RockRabbit aligning our business model with the climate impact and social impact that we want to have, and so that's what's motivating to us.
So that's a great segue to the next point. Right? We talk a lot about impact and climate, and one question I had was, how do you measure that impact? And if there are real tangible examples, so that was one thing I wanted to be discussed, and I would like to start with you, and if you can give some examples of tangible impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, for RockRabbit, so since we're a software layer that effectively lowers the friction for heat pump projects, for instance, we're kind of more of an enabling technology. So it is harder for us to take credit, for instance, for all of the emissions reductions from heat pump installs. What we do is we estimate our impact by taking kind of a fraction of those, or attributing a fraction of those emissions to RockRabbit by streamlining, by enabling more rapid adoption. And so that's kind of the general kind of gist of how we think about our impact, making it a lot easier for contractors to sell these projects, increasing materially the number of projects that are moving forward because they have access to capital. In terms of metrics, we track a lot of different metrics, and it's really multi-purpose. One component is because my co-founder and I are impact driven. We want to know what impact we're having. That informs our own kind of day-to-day decision making and sort of what sort of refinements we might need to our kind of go-to-market, to our product. It's also really helpful from an employee kind of attraction and retention standpoint, because everyone else is impact focused as well. They want to see what impact that their long hours, ultimately are having, and how they're helping to address the climate crisis. So I think that's one component of where we use these metrics, as well as in investor narratives and customer narratives, et cetera. Just a couple more things I mentioned, and then I'll pass it over. But because of the nature of our product, we also look at impact in a couple other ways. We track metrics related to contractor usage, specifically how many of the contractors leveraging RockRabbit are so-called small mom-and-pop contractors. As folks in here may know, there's a very long tail, so to speak, of small contractors doing like half of the installs, kind of nationwide. Or it's a very large percentage. And so what we enable is kind of democratizing access to these incentives. And so we track that, as well as the end consumer, like how many of these projects are for income qualified customers or in equity programs of some sort.
No, I appreciate that. I think, just to democratize and then make it available across the board. When I was looking for contractors, I didn't even know this a couple of years ago. And to even have the ability to go to people who would be more sustainable, it makes a huge opportunity to choose as a homeowner myself. So that's fantastic. Rita, would you like to add on your end?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna put on my strategy hat and my customer success hat. So that's the other half I spend my time on, is helping companies, especially in that B2B area, retain and grow customers. So the way I think of impact, especially for founders and startups in this room, is like how many clients are you serving? Like, to your point, right? Like, how many clients are you serving? How long have you served for? And what's the impact you are making? So that's one way of thinking about that. The other way of thinking about it is also, you can think about it, as Amy was saying, qualitatively or quantitatively, and finally financially. So when I think about, this is like an example of qualitative and quantitative. I heard about this company recently. It's called Beam Impact, and what they are making available is through their platform, consumers to be able to connect with sustainable brands, and then they give a portion of the money made to not-for-profit. So double impact. So in a way, they have a triple bottom line. So that was an interesting way of looking at impact for me. And then on the quantitative side, I know Amy, has touched on the energy piece. One of my clients is a B Corp, and they produce goods, and they use a lot of plastic to produce goods. So the two metrics they were tracking is how much of the plastic they're using is recycled and not virgin plastic, and also right from a design perspective, how many elements of circularity can be built into that. So I think, to me, as a person who likes data, there's so many metrics you can track, and to me that means you can, if you hit 1 or 2 or 3 metrics as a founder, you can tell a story. Like, this is the business value I'm adding. Yes, let's abate climate change, but if that doesn't appeal to your point, Divya, like, it has to make a business case. So that's, to me, having more metrics is exciting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rito. Do you want to add anything on that? Okay. Let me then ask you the next part, because you want to add something?
I would just say, from a supply chain perspective, there's a lot of KPIs and metrics in that space. And so I think that the starting point, though, is benchmarking, right? Making sure you kind of have a sense of what you are, where you're at and what you're tracking. And then, of course, building strategies around that. And from a sustainability or climate perspective, emissions is definitely a big part of that. And you have to literally look across, again, scope 1, 2, and 3 effectively to make sure that you're capturing, again, those right benchmarks, and which does take a lot of collaboration with your suppliers. And there's a lot of startups right now that are saying, oh, we can get Scope 3 emissions, and it's a lot easier said than done. So I would just say that, if that's an area you're looking at, the guesstimations are not going to necessarily work when it comes to investments from corporations to actually put behind that. So just really understanding that due diligence work is going to have to happen at the ground level to be able to really quantify the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on the note of supply chain, the next question I wanted to ask was, what are some unique opportunities you see for climate tech in supply chain and energy efficiency?
Yeah, no, thank you. People are basically saying energy efficiency piece is the lowest hanging fruit, right? And this is something that can start now, is happening now. There is great first of a kind and other kind of new technologies as we think about the transformation of supply chain and where we need to go. And there's a lot of necessary investment for that kind of hardware and things like that. But the software opportunity, energy efficiency opportunity does exist today. And I think some of the smart technology that's happening at the farm level, is definitely a great place to start thinking about how do you save time, for a lot of these farmers when you go to kind of where sort of that intelligence piece is really going to help save yields. It's going to help, be proactive in saving some of the, some of the lost kind of, materials that basically supply most of these products. So smart aerators is something that I know some of our clients are looking at. There's AI technology, of course, that's being used on fishing vessels, right? So looking at also getting a better sense of how do you track, not just how to find the fish, but also, okay, are there biodiversity concerns there? And how do you sort of make sure that, as a fisherman who's out at sea, that you're also, again, hitting the commitments of, hey, the byproduct of or the bycatch, for example, is not going to get impacted, right? So it's looking at technology as a supplement to service maybe some existing practices right now. Energy efficiency, of course, there's, insulation that you can do in the walls and ceilings. There's ways to also have smart technology that shuts off, energy use in certain rooms or certain parts of the facility automatically. And it seems sort of basic for us, but in some of these countries, that are really producing a lot of our goods, they're not quite modernized. And I think that modernization piece has been sort of in need for, at least over, let's say, 15 to 20 years. So why not modernize with climate tech, right? Why doesn't this be the moment? Because you need those insights, you need the data, you need transparency, AI needs it. So this is the time to kind of, I think, lean forward into this new tech opportunity, but with the climate tech versus, just overall just data gathering.
Yeah, no, I think I got to work with one of the global startups some time ago. I visited their facilities, and this company had actually attached a camera into a movable, automated vehicle that used to go across the farms and then determine the water level so that they can determine if you have to irrigate so that less water usage, because water shortage is a big issue across the world, and water conservation, and plus also one of the such farming was also focused on pesticides and how much do we even need to use pesticides. So I'd love to hear your feedback. I think you were also involved in similar kind of.
Yeah, I'll say I think we're living in a time where we can have superpowers. Sustainability teams can have superpowers, procurement teams can have superpowers, financial teams can have superpowers, compliance teams can have superpowers. And what do I mean by this superpower around climate intelligence or decision intelligence? I think there are three, so the opportunity for me is three shifts that need to happen in the space. One is to go from fragmentation to unified view. So it's not about I'm trying to optimize for carbon, or I'm just trying to optimize for water, or I'm trying to optimize for resilience, or I'm trying to optimize for disruption, or I'm trying to optimize for waste, or I'm trying to optimize for profitability. You're trying to optimize across multiple dimensions at the same time and figure out what is the right decision. It doesn't mean that the same thing will reduce carbon and reduce energy and reduce water, but we ought to move from like a programmatic mindset to, do we have the intelligence to let me make the best decision by looking across all of these dimensions is one. The second shift is around quantification, so what? We have to move beyond data and KPIs on emissions, water use, energy use to what is the financial cost of that. And so if sustainability wants to speak to the CFO is not going to come and learn climate science. You have to speak ROI, you have to speak ROIC, that is the translation layer that needs to happen. And the third one is actionability. Okay, I have these facilities in a water-stressed area, and they are water-hungry because they are in this part of the supply chain. So what? What is the specific action I can take in a specific facility that is in a specific part of my production chain that is producing a specific material? And I think the opportunity we have with not just AI, but physical sciences, traditional AI, machine learning models, and generative AI, and what's happening now, is to be able to start getting these superpowers to be able to optimize across these dimensions.
I think I love the superpowers concept. It's actually giving me some ideas for asking another question later about your superpowers. But great thoughts there actually. You talked about how tying it back to money, and one of the things I've heard from one of the climate investors, so one of the most successful climate investors, Chris Saka, he talked about it too, where he said it's only when you're able to tie it to the people who can talk more about the impact in monitoring. That's when climate is going to be able to deliver the fullest extent, right? Because we moved from climate 1.0 to 2.0 to now 3.0. We have been able to look at, can we build profitable companies in climate? So great points on that. There are a lot of entrepreneurs we saw, by show of hands, many of them had raised their hands. So two of you have raised money, Amy, yourself, and Karan. Maybe we'll start with you, Amy. Tell us a little bit about your journey as an entrepreneur in climate. What were some positives? What were some challenges, especially for entrepreneurs who are looking to build a company and raise money?
Yeah, sure. So I'll let's see. Maybe I'll start from the very beginning of the fundraising journey, but I'll keep my comments somewhat brief. But happy to speak afterwards with anyone who might want to, talk further. So we're around 2 years old, and we started out, really. What we did first, actually, and the key part of our fundraising journey really started with forming an advisory board. And so if there are any entrepreneurs who are really early stage, or maybe even just kind of contemplating their startup at this point in time, that was a pretty key decision for us. We did that very intentionally, both because neither myself or my co-founder Riyadh were founders, and so we were in the past, so we were both first-time founders. We knew that we needed a deep bench of advisors, but also, a certain number of them became our angel investors in our seed round, and also introduced us to other folks that invested in our kind of friends and family angel round. And so that, I think there's the idiom, if you want money, ask for advice. So we definitely, that played out really well for us, and it kind of makes sense. It's a good progression. Then once we had our angel round, we closed an institutional round afterwards. We did participate in Berkeley Skydeck. There are a number of different accelerators out there that can help inject a certain amount of capital, obviously for an ownership stake. We had a good experience with Berkeley Skydeck. We're probably a bit more on the mature side in terms of companies going through there, because we had a term sheet on the way, and so we closed our institutional round kind of concurrently, actually, with participating in that program. But there's a very deep advisor bench. Actually, that's how I met Deep originally, for instance. And also a lot of corporate partners typically as well through programs like that. So that can be a really nice structured engagement. And if you need, as a founder, to really strengthen some of your fundamentals related to your pitch deck, related to analyzing your go-to-market pricing, et cetera, that can be a really great forum. So we did that, and we're definitely happy that we went that route as well. We raised a little bit more money as well last fall, prior to the election, and I thought it was a hard time to fundraise last year. I imagine it's a little bit more difficult this year even, but we found that there are investors out there looking to spend capital. The bar is raised a bit, I would say, in terms of level of traction. You probably need to demonstrate the revenue targets you likely need to hit. So that was already the case last year, but there is capital to be deployed. Investors our current investors, for instance, are still investing in other companies. So happy to kind of talk more about that, but I would just, offer you some encouragement. Definitely don't be discouraged. I mean, even in good times, it can take 70 no's before you get that yes. And that was one of our advisors, one of the co-founders of ChargePoint, who told me that when he was raising for ChargePoint, 70 no's before you get that yes. And so it's hard even in the best of times, I would say, so don't be discouraged.
No, thank you. That's fantastic. In like 2 years, you've come so far. So that's very encouraging. I'm sure many entrepreneurs will benefit from that. Karan, would you like to share your journey?
Yeah, I was fortunate. So Athena started, my co-founder and I, this is just under 2 years ago as well. And I was fortunate that 80% of what came in our angel round came in from my previous investors from previous venture here. So it was very helpful for them to just say on day one, hey, we're gonna back you, myself, my co-founder, and go do something again in this space. And then we've taken in a little extra. So we'll raise again. But I realized that I'm fortunate in that space. In terms of, I would echo what Amy said on her points, but I'll also say that I think there are two things in this market, which is tough. One is, I would have conversations well in advance of when you want to raise, and it doesn't even have to be a pitch conversation. It really is a conversation around, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm thinking about. To your point, ask advice or say, or to get a better sense of what would they need to see for it to be not just a yes, but a hell yes. Because to be honest, like the most frustrating ones are the ones where it's like, oh, it's interesting, let's have a follow-up meeting. Oh, it's interesting, let's have a follow-up meeting. And then it's like 4 weeks or sometimes 3 months to get to a no, right? Around it. So I would start to have enough soft conversations that are not pitch conversations. You'll get insights from those conversations of what they're looking for. You'll figure out who's really interesting for you, and then when you get to the pitch, you almost want to try it with a few, and then you hit your real targets around it would sort of be one. The second is, I will echo the point and underline it, that I think the bar is higher now in terms of raising. So traction, but also capital efficiency. So on one end, the bar is higher, but on the other hand, the tools and the technology that is available today, you can get a lot more done for a lot less capital. So I would try to really figure out, how are you getting your traction metrics proven with as little capital as possible? And today, right, like a prototype can be built by anybody in this room with the tools that are available if you put your mind to it. Some things are harder, like deep tech, deep science, right? Like there's a different view, but if we're talking about software, so I would just try to really keep in mind capital efficiency and how are you always ahead of the round. So if seed now needs close to 1 million, how do you get there even before, right? In your pre-seed, or if A requires, right, like, sort of whatever ARR hurdle, how are you getting there well before around? So you almost want to raise a round ahead. It's easier said than done because you need to be able to prove those metrics.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think it's great to get different perspectives, one from a first-time entrepreneur and one from a serial entrepreneur. And the struggles are still there, but there is hope. Right? That's certainly good to hear in this forum.
The journey is full of struggle.
Yes, it's just the beginning, right? That's the first, maybe, of many struggles. Yeah. Actually, my last question before we open up for Q&A. There's a lot going on right now from the current policy and economic conditions that are happening. Just last week, I learned this term called greenwashing. Right? We've heard of greenwashing before, and we try to not do greenwashing. Now, companies that are actually green have to hush about it. I was shocked. But that being said, I'd like to hear from some of the experts here. What do you think is the impact of the current policy and economic condition on climate? You can start with you.
Yeah, I mean, so bottom line, at least for the clients that I work with, the ones that are doing the sustainability work, like the real change throughout the supply chain, they're doing it because it's a business imperative. They're not doing it necessarily for regulatory compliance. They're not doing it for a sustainability report. They're doing it because their actual materials are at risk. Their products are at risk. There is a global supply chain that is going to be hit with climate disruptions, with floods, with droughts, with changes also in geopolitical situations. And so, there's a lot of noise, I think, right now. I think companies are just trying, the ones that are doing the work, they may not be boasting about it because, of course, the tides have changed a little bit in terms of what this sort of temperament of understanding is from a government perspective, but also from a consumer perspective, right? We are also on the tail end of, the fear of, okay, is this greenwashing, kind of the pre-greenwashing. So I think that, for my world is that because a lot of the client work that I do is to help companies even figure out what story they can tell, which means what is that hard work, what is the KPIs, what is the data behind what you're doing, how are you investing in changing the lives of the workers in the supply chain, or fighting, the emissions, in your, long tail of suppliers. One thing that's happening in the U.S., we know right now, I think there's a lot of companies that are just sort of waiting to see. The states are going to play a really big role. California, luckily for us, is I think going to be one of the biggest leaders. I was at an event yesterday saying that, California within 2 years, wants to be the number one climate hub in the whole country. I mean, there's a lot of ambition, I think, here. And then as far as Europe, I was just in France not that long ago at a global conference for EcoVadis, and they just rolled back some of the requirements for the CSRD, for Europe, or in terms of where it used to want to have scope 1, 2, and 3 disclosed from a lot of the companies, and a lot of companies pushed back for economic competition reasons and said, well, wait a minute, if the rest of the world isn't really doing this, why should we? And so that's shifting over there, and I think the sentiment is still strong. But again, for the companies that are doing it just for regulatory compliance, I think are going to be behind because the pendulum will swing back. And again, the business imperative is there because the climate doesn't care who's in office, right? This is going to happen irrespective of that.
Yeah, so, there's lots of flux, and you all know that. So I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to share a stat that I read recently that businesses that do not adapt to the physical risks of climate change are going to see upwards of like 7% of their revenues or even profits. I don't remember the exact number impacted annually. So it is going to become more and more of a business imperative. And also, as Divya said, it's going to be local, and that's why we started the clean table, because we think we can do something locally. And then the last thing I will say is, it's business. Corporations are corporations. They're in the business of making money and making money for their stakeholders and shareholders. So going back to the basics of here's the business case. And in the sales, if you're early stage, you can't show real ROI, but have those assumptions and those models, like in any other sales process, to say how you would get to an ROI. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I think what I'm hearing from both of you, one is business, tying it to business, and also integrating it across every step of the way of the business, all parts of business, be it sales, marketing, engineering. So we would love to conclude this panel from hearing from all of you. What are some final words of wisdom that you would like to share with everybody here?
All right, so I'm going to share that invest in yourself. Don't be extractive of yourself. So by that I mean take breaks, use anything that grounds you, like meditation, etc. And then the other thing I would say is, have those big dreams and have those goals, and in a way, kind of let go of them, don't obsess, but take action every day. Because that's what I found is if I dream something big and if I obsess over it, then sometimes it can be challenging, especially when things are challenging. But if I dream it and take an action every day, I feel I am moving forward.
It's been a few years, but there's this really interesting piece I read called The Psychological Price of Entrepreneurship. This is coming from somebody who's a serial entrepreneur for 15 years or so, which they had this analogy that said that being an entrepreneur is like being a person riding a lion. On the outside, it looks like, wow, that is so cool, and it's so brave, and it's so amazing. And then on the inside, it's like, man, this is like the craziest idea ever, and how am I just like not going to die in the next minute here? I thought it was quite apt. And so with that backdrop, I'd almost say, part of it for me is like, it's usually helpful to just talk to other founders, right? And it's not even that they can help me in specific ways. Like, you just share stories and then you realize you're not alone. Like, whatever you're feeling, whatever the outside it looks like, oh, raised a big round or did this, and you've been there, right? Like, it's all like, everybody is like, there's all this chaos behind that. And so just, if nothing else, just like, have a group of others who are going through the journey, and it's helpful to know that you're not alone in that.
I would say for the entrepreneurs, just really making sure you're solving a problem, get close to your customer early, pilot, do your due diligence, making sure that you have a good sense of, is this an urgent need, a little bit about, tapping into financial resources, because it does get dry, especially in this, again, no pun intended, this climate, as far as getting that early traction is going to also help you unlock more VC money as well. But again, having those proof points with customers and potentially having an on-ramp for more long-term solutions is really going to help you, separate from the crowd, especially being Silicon Valley. It's really something that I think not enough startups do early enough in that journey. So just definitely get with your customer, have a pragmatic approach for a problem right now. Still dream big and still plan for kind of the future, but get with your customers ASAP.
Basically +1 to all of that. I was going to say I have something very similar regarding not tempering your ambition, especially in light of it being a very uncertain time, and it's going to be a bit of a rocky time. But I would just encourage, especially the entrepreneurs, to not hold back. And I like the self-care reminder as well. I think that's always a good one.
And to add to all of those wonderful inputs, be part of a community. We're all a community here. We're building this community for all of us to actually be there for each other, to share, to care for each other. So just be part of this and then make sure you lean on each other for support. With that, I'd like to thank the panel here with all of you.